Adriano Valente never trusted rooms with windows because windows created angles and angles created threats. So La Serpent had none. Only black marble walls and candlelight that made every man inside look guilty. And Adriano sat with his back to the wall like he always did, jacket still on, watch removed, gun resting where his hand could find it without thinking, while three men across the table waited for his decision, pretending they weren't afraid. And beside him sat his daughter Lucia. Valente, 22 months old and silent since birth. Doctors called it trauma and genetics and spoke softly like lies tasted better that way. But Adriano knew she wasn't broken. She was listening, watching everything with those dark, careful eyes while her fingers gripped a worn stuffed lamb. The deal was almost done, papers already open, rain trapped somewhere above the ceiling. And then the waitress came, moving too carefully for someone who had nothing to hide. Her name tag, said Elena. Early 20s, plain black dress. Hair pulled back tight like the world had taught her not to trust it. Her hands trembled as she set a glass of water down, and the lamb slipped. Hit the floor with a small sound that should have meant nothing, but Lucia reacted like it was a gunshot, her head snapping up, eyes locking onto the waitress, the room going unnaturally still as Elena froze mid-movement. Something passing between her and the child that wasn't recognition but instinct, Lucia's mouth opening and Adriano leaning forward before he realized he'd moved. The sound that came out of his daughter rough and untrained like a door forced open after years sealed shut. Ma. One of the men laughed nervously and tried to explain it away until Adriano silenced him with a single word. Lucia stood in her chair and pointed, not at her father, but at the waitress, Mama, the word landing heavy in the sealed room. Mama. Guards shifted, hands moving. Elena's face drained of color as she stammered that she didn't know the child, that there had to be a mistake, but Lucia screamed then, not in fear but in need, reaching for the waitress with both hands, crying like something essential had finally been returned. Mama, Mama. Adriano stood so fast his chair crashed backward and told his men to bring her closer. Elena backed away begging, swearing she'd done nothing. But he didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to, and the second the guards pulled her close to Lucia's, crying stopped. The child pressed her face into the woman's chest and relaxed completely, asleep within seconds, and Adriano stared at the impossible calm, at the faint scar below Elena's collarbone, at the way his daughter clung to her like gravity itself had chosen sides, and when he finally spoke his voice was quiet and lethal as he asked the waitress who she was, and Elena swallowed and whispered the only answer she had that she didn't know. And Adriano decided in that moment that nothing in this world terrified him more than a truth that had waited this long to surface. Adriano ordered the room cleared without raising his voice, and the three men across the table didn't argue, because fear understands tone better than words. Guards escorted them out, while Elena stood frozen with Lucia, asleep against her chest, unsure whether moving would get her shot, and Adriano watched her the way he watched loaded guns, carefully, measuring weight and danger. Then he told her she wasn't leaving, not tonight. Not until he understood why his daughter had spoken to her, and only her. Elena tried to explain that she was just a waitress, that she had never seen the child before, that this had to be coincidence. But coincidence had never survived long around Adriano Valente. He had her escorted through back corridors into a private suite guarded on both sides. Not a cell, something worse, a place that pretended to be safe. Lucia slept on through it all, breathing steady, fingers still curled in Elena's dress, and that terrified Adriano more than any threat ever had. He summoned doctors, then security, then men whose only job was finding ghosts. DNA samples were taken without explanation. Elena protested until Adriano silenced her with a look that promised consequences. Hours passed. Rain still trapped above them. And when Lucia finally woke, she didn't cry or reach for her father. She reached again for Elena and said the word a second time. Clearer now, Mama. And the room went cold. Adriano dismissed everyone except his most trusted lieutenant and stood alone, watching the woman and the child. Memories he had buried clawed upward. A girl from years ago. A disappearance that never sat right. A report that had come back too clean. And when the test results arrived, just before dawn, he already knew what they would say. Elena collapsed when he told her, denial shattering into panic, fragments of a past she had been forced to forget rushing back. And Adriano understood then that someone had lied to him once, stolen a woman from him, stolen years from his daughter, and that the world was about to pay for the delay. Adriano didn't give her time to recover. He pulled her to the window, showing the sprawling estate still slick with rain, the guards pacing, dogs circling, everything perfectly in place, but nothing could contain what was coming. "They know she exists," he said quietly, not looking at Elena, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. "Salvatore, my brother, the one who made everything clean and invisible. He's already moving." Elena clutched Lucia tighter, her mind spinning with memories of the clinic, of promises made for money, of a child she had carried and buried in silence. And now she had her back, alive, calling her mama, and Adriano was telling her they were hunted. The storm outside had eased, but the tension inside this room had only thickened, and Adriano turned finally, shadowed in the dim light, every inch the man who could crush empires with one decision. And he whispered, "You will stay close every second, because the second you're separated, they'll take her again." And this time, his hand drifted to the Glock at his hip, thumb brushing the grip. "This time they won't come back for explanations." Elena's lips trembled. She wasn't trained for this world. She had been a nurse, a waitress, a survivor of quiet struggles, but never a pawn in Mafia wars. Yet here she was, the child of Adriano Valente, clinging to her like a lifeline, the enemy watching from invisible corners, and she realized that to survive, she had to be more than a mother. She had to be the weapon. Adriano nodded once, almost approvingly, and motioned to the adjoining room where phones, laptops, and stacks of confidential files waited. "Tonight, you learn who you are," he said, "and why your daughter knows you better than I ever could." Lucia stirred again, murmuring something incoherent, half asleep, half sensing the danger, and Elena swallowed, steeling herself for the night that would decide whether she and the little girl survived the Valente Empire intact, or whether the shadows outside would reclaim what was theirs. Adriano led Elena and Lucia down the marble hallway, the echo of their footsteps swallowed by the vastness of the estate, past oil paintings of ancestors who had built the empire with blood and fear. Every room they passed reminded her how out of place she was, how fragile, how human, and yet she carried something no one else could claim, a bond with the child who had survived every lie and every danger. "The lab's ready," Adriano said, opening a door to a dimly lit basement lined with steel tables, computers, and sealed evidence boxes. "We verify everything tonight. Every connection, every shadow, every betrayal. You need to see it, understand it. Only then can we plan who moves and who falls." Elena nodded, heart pounding, brushing a curl from Lucia's face, feeling the warmth of her daughter's tiny hand clutching hers. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a moment, the estate's walls, usually a fortress, felt like a cage. Adriano turned to her, expression unreadable. "They won't wait until morning. Every second counts. If you want her safe, you need to see the truth, no matter how dark it is." Elena swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the empire pressing down. The storm outside, now a faint whisper compared to the one rising inside. The night had begun. Elena stepped closer to the steel table, her eyes scanning the rows of sealed tubes, folders, and medical devices, each labeled in precise handwriting. She could feel Lucia squirming in her arms, restless but trusting, sensing the tension in her mother's body. "Start with the DNA," Adriano commanded, his voice low but unyielding. The technician, a thin man with glasses that reflected the harsh fluorescent light, began preparing the samples. Elena's pulse raced as she watched the swabs being compared, markers flashing on the monitor. The numbers appeared, and then confirmation. The connection was undeniable. Her heart swelled and broke at the same time. This tiny human in her arms was truly hers. Tears threatened, but she held them back, knowing that celebration would be premature. "Now," Adriano said, "we find out who lied, who orchestrated it, and who's still a threat. This isn't over. The moment you leave this basement, the world outside becomes a battlefield, and everyone has a target on your back." Elena nodded, gripping Lucia tighter, the child's warmth anchoring her as Adriano pulled up files and photographs, maps of estates, financial ledgers, and intercepted messages. The night was far from over, and every second would decide who survived the Empire and who fell. Adriano tapped the screen, and a series of encrypted messages scrolled across the monitor. Names, dates, transactions, all pointing to someone inside the family who had played both sides. Elena's stomach twisted as she recognized a familiar signature. Her late husband's brother, the one who had smiled at her during family dinners, pretending loyalty while orchestrating lies in the shadows. Salvatore, she whispered, the name bitter on her tongue. Adriano didn't respond, only pointed to the financial transfers and backdoor accounts. Each entry was a thread, and he began to trace them, connecting the dots between missing funds, falsified documents, and whispers of betrayal. He's planning to use you, Adriano said quietly, not looking at her. He knows about the child. He knows you exist. Every move you make will be watched. You need a plan, and you need it now. Elena looked down at Lucia, her tiny fingers curling around hers. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about survival, about reclaiming the future stolen from them. The storm outside had intensified, rain lashing against the windows, but inside the lab, a colder storm had begun, the one of secrets, lies, and a family empire built on fear. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every whisper could betray a life. Elena took a deep breath. The night had become a war, and she was determined to fight. Adriano leaned closer to the screen, his fingers dancing over the keyboard with precision born of years in the shadows. Listen, he said, his voice low. You can't trust anyone. Not your uncle, not the council, not even the guards. If Salvatore moves first, he won't leave a trace. We need leverage. Elena's eyes flicked to Lucia, who was perched in her small chair, golden curls damp from the rain, eyes wide and curious. The child didn't understand the danger yet, but Elena felt every heartbeat as if it were a countdown. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. Adriano nodded. First, we confirm who else knows. Second, we secure the estate. Every exit, every route, every weak point. And third, he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. We make him believe you're still vulnerable. He underestimates you, and that's our advantage. Elena swallowed hard, feeling the adrenaline ignite her nerves. Outside, the city howled, a symphony of sirens and thunder. But inside, a different storm was rising, one of strategy, deception, and the unyielding will of a mother who would not let her child be used as a pawn. Every second counted. Every moment of hesitation could cost them everything. She clenched her jaw, eyes narrowing. Then we move now, she said. Adriano's lips tightened. Then we move now. They didn't waste time arguing about how dangerous it was because danger was the language both of them already spoke, just with different accents. And within minutes the estate shifted from quiet luxury to controlled lockdown, gates sealing, guards repositioning, cameras rerouted, Adriano issuing orders with calm precision while Elena watched. Realizing this wasn't panic, it was choreography, every man moving like a piece on a board he had memorized years ago. And when he finally turned back to her, his eyes were sharp, almost curious, like he was studying a weapon he hadn't known he owned. He thinks you're still the woman he erased, Adriano said, the one who disappeared quietly and stayed gone. And Elena felt something harden inside her, because that woman was already dead, buried with the lies and the paperwork and the years stolen from her. Lucia, shifting in her arms like she sensed the change, small fingers clutching tighter, grounding her. Adriano handed Elena a phone, untraceable, cold metal heavy in her palm, and told her Salvatore would contact her before dawn because men like him couldn't resist checking their work, couldn't resist reopening old wounds to be sure they still bled. And when the call came, Elena was to answer, to sound uncertain, grateful, small, everything he expected her to be, while Adriano listened from the shadows, mapping every word, every pause, every slip. Elena nodded even as fear crawled up her spine, because pretending it kept her alive once, and now it would protect her daughter. And when the phone finally vibrated in her hand, the room seemed to contract around her, Adriano lifting one finger for silence as Lucia slept against her chest, the name flashing on the screen like a ghost that refused to stay buried. Salvatore. Elena inhaled, steadying herself, and answered, her voice soft, fragile, exactly the way he remembered, and on the other end he smiled into the lie, already convinced he was still in control, not knowing that the word mama had shattered everything he thought he owned. Hello. Elena's voice trembled just enough to sell the story, the soft quiver of uncertainty, the perfect bait. On the other end, Salvatore's tone was sharp, calculating, dripping with the arrogance of a man used to bending people like clay. "Where are you?" he asked, each word like a knife wrapped in velvet. Elena swallowed, pressing Lucia closer to her chest. I had to leave the city," she whispered, letting the lie taste real, letting it sound like fear had driven her into hiding. He laughed softly, the sound low and dangerous. "You think you can run from me?" Salvatore's voice slid under her skin like ice. Elena's pulse spiked, but she didn't flinch. She had rehearsed this. "I didn't run," she said. I waited for the right moment." The line went quiet for a heartbeat. Then, waiting? For what? For who? He asked, suspicion curling around every syllable. Elena closed her eyes, her mind racing. "For her," she breathed, tilting Lucia slightly so the little girl's ear caught the warmth of her voice. "For my daughter." Silence. Then a sharp exhale from him. Almost disbelief, almost fear. "She's alive." Salvatore's voice broke, revealing a crack in the armor he had worn too long. Elena felt it, that infinitesimal shift, a tilt in power, and she smiled slightly, though her hand stayed tense around her daughter. "She is," she whispered, "and she's mine." On the other end, he ground his teeth. "Where?" Elena hesitated, the pause long enough to make him imagine every possible trap, every risk, while she held the truth close, just out of reach. "Safe," she finally said. "Safe and watched. And if you value your life, you stay away." There was a click, a sound that made her stomach drop, and then silence. But Elena knew he was listening, feeling the weight of her words, understanding that for the first time in years, he no longer held all the cards. She tightened her grip on Lucia, inhaled the scent of her hair, the faint vanilla that lingered, and allowed herself a moment, just a heartbeat, to feel the relief of being a mother who had reclaimed what had been stolen. Outside, the estate remained quiet. The storm passed, but inside the walls, the game had just begun, the pieces moving on a board only she and Adriano truly understood. And for the first time, the word mama didn't just belong to a child. It belonged to a promise of war, protection, and the reckoning that would come. Elena pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the hidden corridor, listening to the echo of her own heartbeat. Lucia's soft breathing was a rhythm that grounded her, a reminder of what she was fighting for. The estate outside looked peaceful, almost innocent under the moonlight, but Elena knew better. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every whisper could be a trap. She traced the lines of the floor, memorizing the pattern of the tiles, the slightest imperfection that could give her an edge if pursuit came. Her phone buzzed silently in her pocket, a coded message from Matteo, the only man she trusted to keep her daughter alive if she fell. "They're moving tonight," it read. Elena exhaled, steadying herself. Tonight meant action. She had spent months preparing, planting information, creating diversions, learning the rhythms of the Moretti estate, the habits of men who thought power gave them foresight. But power, she knew, had blind spots, and she intended to exploit them. She crouched low, inching toward the main hall, every step deliberate, silent, carrying the weight of fear and determination in equal measure. In the shadows, she could see the faint outline of guards patrolling in predictable patterns, their movements disciplined, but predictable. She waited for the right moment, letting the tension build, letting every nerve sharpen, until finally the opportunity presented itself. A single misstep by the younger guard near the east wing. Elena moved, fluid, almost invisible, a ghost in the night. Lucia stirred in her arms, mumbling softly, and Elena whispered we're safe. Safe, but only for now. She pressed on, toward the study where Salvatore kept the files, the evidence that could end the game, the leverage she needed to finally claim what had been stolen from her. Every door she passed, every shadow she skirted, brought her closer to confrontation, to truth to a reckoning that would leave no one unscathed. And somewhere deep inside, a part of her smiled at the inevitability of it. Tonight, the Moretti Empire would learn that ghosts can fight back. The study door loomed ahead, a solid barrier of oak and steel, guarding secrets worth more than fortunes, secrets that could topple kings in tailored suits. Elena's fingers traced the grooves of the handle, feeling the cool metal pulse with the tension in the room. She listened. Nothing but the faint hum of the central heating and the distant murmur of voices she couldn't place. Every step had been calculated, yet the thrill of the unknown coiled in her stomach. With a silent breath, she twisted the lock, a faint click announcing her entry, and slipped inside. The room smelled of leather and old paper, a faint trace of expensive cigar smoke lingering in the air. Her eyes scanned the shelves, the desk, the drawers, everything a possible hiding place. Her pulse quickened as she spotted the filing cabinet in the corner, reinforced but not impenetrable. Elena crouched, pulling a set of lock picks from her coat. One wrong move, 1 second too slow, and alarms would sound. She worked carefully, each click echoing like a gunshot in her head. Then, the final turn, and the drawer slid open, revealing a stack of folders, neatly labeled, fat with evidence. She pulled one, then another, flipping through documents, photos, digital drives, everything she had been promised by the inside contact, everything she needed to strike. A faint noise made her freeze. Footsteps, not the regular patrol. Too soft, too deliberate. Someone was coming, and they weren't alone. She grabbed Lucia, pressing the child against her chest, covering her with her coat. Shadowed shapes moved past the doorway, murmuring in low tones, too close, too dangerous. Elena's mind raced. Every plan she had rehearsed now depended on a single choice: fight, flee, or hide and hope. She exhaled slowly, letting the tension sharpen her senses. Tonight would decide everything. The stakes were higher than ever, and the Moretti Empire was about to meet its reckoning. The footsteps faded, leaving a fragile silence that buzzed with danger. Elena eased back from the cabinet, still clutching the folder stack, every nerve on edge. Lucia stirred in her arms, her small whimpers a reminder of why she couldn't afford mistakes. She knew the layout, every hall, every exit, but her escape had to be precise. The slightest misstep would mean capture, or worse. She inched toward the window at the far side of the room, a reinforced pane but thin enough with the right tools. One last look at the evidence, the proof of the lies, the betrayals, the secret ledger that could shatter the Moretti Empire. Her fingers brushed the cold glass. Outside, the night had deepened. The city lights flickered in the distance, blind to the storm building inside this mansion. Elena set Lucia down gently, whispering a soft promise. "I've got you. We're getting out." The lockpick slid into the window latch, and with a soft click, it budged. She pushed slowly, the glass scraping against the frame, every sound magnified. Behind her, a shadow moved, subtle but enough to make her heart spike. She spun, clutching the folder like a weapon, eyes scanning the darkness. Nothing. The intruders had passed, or maybe they hadn't noticed. She didn't wait to find out. One hand on the ledge, she guided the window open, then hoisted herself and the child onto the fire escape. The cold metal bit into her palms, adrenaline burning through every vein, keeping fear at bay. Every step down was calculated, every creak resisted, until she reached the alley below. Freedom was a breath away, but the game was far from over. The Moretti Empire was vast, and someone would notice the missing evidence, the missing heiress, and Elena's escape would ignite a war that couldn't be contained. She pulled Lucia close, feeling the tiny heartbeat against hers, and disappeared into the shadows, the city swallowing them whole, leaving only the faint echo of danger in their wake. Elena moved through the alleys like a ghost, every shadow a potential threat, every flickering streetlight a test of her nerves. She didn't dare look back. She knew pursuit would be instant, relentless, and deadly. Her grip tightened on the folder, the evidence inside capable of tearing the Moretti Empire apart if it reached the wrong hands, or saving them if it reached the right ones. She had memorized the streets, the safe routes, the hidden stairwells and maintenance corridors that would give her a chance to vanish into the city's underbelly. Above, the rain began to fall, a thin, stinging drizzle that soaked her coat and darkened the cobblestones. Perfect cover, perfect distraction. Lucia stirred in her arms, mumbling a small, confused whimper. Elena whispered, "Shh, just a little further, baby. We're almost safe." The child's curls were damp now, plastered against her tiny head, and Elena's heart tightened at the thought of the danger they'd just escaped. Her mind raced, plotting the next move. She had allies scattered in the city, trusted ones who owed her favors, people who had survived the Moretti wrath before, but every contact was a risk. If the wrong person saw them, the chase would end tonight. Turning a corner, she ducked into the shadow of a closed cafe, sliding against the brick, letting the rain wash over her face. The city was alive with distant sirens, honking cars, the low murmur of voices from people who had no idea what was unfolding in their midst. Elena breathed through her panic, letting the adrenaline sharpen her senses. Somewhere ahead was safety, or at least temporary shelter, and she couldn't afford to hesitate. Every second counted. Every misstep could cost more than just her freedom. It could cost both their lives. She crept toward a service door, rusted and forgotten, pulling it open and slipping inside. The warmth of the building was a stark contrast to the cold rain outside, and for the first time in minutes, she allowed herself a single heartbeat of relief. The room was empty, dusty, abandoned, but secure enough to hide, to plan the next move. She placed Lucia gently on a stack of crates, covering her with a damp scarf. "We're safe for now," she murmured, brushing the wet hair from the child's forehead. Then Elena's sharp eyes scanned the darkness, searching for any sign that she had been followed. Nothing moved. Silence reigned, but the tension was still thick in the air. Somewhere, far above, the city waited, oblivious, or perhaps complicit, in the danger unfolding below. Elena exhaled slowly, gripping the folder like a lifeline. The truth inside could topple empires, but only if she survived the night. And she intended to. She didn't dare sit, didn't dare relax. Every sound outside the service door made her heart leap. The scuff of a shoe, a car engine sputtering, a distant shout. Her mind raced through contingencies, escape routes, fake identities, safe houses. The folder pressed against her chest was both her shield and her target. Whoever had sent her this information had trusted her life to carry it, and Elena intended to honor that trust. Minutes passed, then an hour, the rain still drumming softly against the metal roof. She whispered to Lucia, "Soon, baby. Soon we'll be somewhere safe." The child's eyes fluttered, half asleep, trusting and unaware of the storm surrounding them. Elena's jaw tightened. She had no room for error, no time for mercy. The Moretti name was everywhere, in every corner, and even the smallest slip could mean discovery. She pressed her back against the wall, listening, waiting, planning her exit. Every shadow, every sound, every heartbeat was a test. She had survived worse, but tonight felt sharper, closer, more dangerous. And yet, in the quiet, a spark of determination burned brighter than fear. She would survive. She had to. For herself. For Lucia. For the truth that could change everything. Stepping lightly, she crept toward the stairwell at the back of the building, opening it just enough to peek outside. The street was empty, slick with rain, reflections of neon signs dancing on the wet asphalt. Perfect. Perfect for disappearing, for vanishing into the maze of the city, for becoming nothing more than a shadow among shadows. Elena slipped through the door, silent as a whisper, pulling the scarf tighter around Lucia. Each step was measured, precise, every movement calculated. She didn't look back, she didn't hesitate, and she didn't breathe too loud. Tonight, the city belonged to her, and if the Moretti dared follow, they would find nothing but emptiness. The first light of dawn threatened the horizon, washing the wet streets in a cold, gray hue. Elena kept moving, relentless, unstoppable, a figure carved from determination and fear. Somewhere ahead, safety waited. Somewhere ahead, the next move in a game that had already cost too much. And Elena would make sure she, and the child in her arms, lived to see it. The city woke slowly, unaware of the storm that had passed through the night. Cars splashed through puddles, taxi horns blaring, oblivious to the silent fugitive weaving through alleys and side streets. Elena's pulse was steady, trained, each turn and shadow memorized from nights of planning, each doorway a potential sanctuary or death trap. She pulled Lucia closer, feeling the child stir and sleep, the small hand gripping her coat like a lifeline. By the time she reached the edge of the old industrial district, the sun was a pale smear over the skyline. Elena paused, scanning the empty streets. No tails, no drones, no cameras glaring from rooftops, at least none that she could see. Her mind ticked through possibilities, recalling every warning, every lesson learned from years on the edge. She ducked into a narrow stairwell leading to a rooftop, climbing silently, her legs burning with effort, until she emerged onto a deserted expanse of gravel and rusted vents. From here, the city sprawled beneath her, a concrete jungle of danger and opportunity. She set Lucia down gently, brushing damp curls from her forehead. "Almost there," she whispered, more to steady herself and the child. The wind whipped, sharp and cold, carrying with it the scent of oil, asphalt, and rain. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and Elena's gut tightened. Someone had noticed. But she had planned for this. From the rooftop, she spotted a fire escape leading to the back of a building across the street, an access point few would see or consider. One step at a time, one breath, one calculated move, and they would disappear. She hoisted Lucia in her arms, heart hammering, and began the leap across the gap between roofs, landing with the precision of a cat. Each landing echoed like thunder in the alley below, but no one came. Her training had made her a ghost, her resolve a weapon. Elena crouched behind an HVAC unit, eyes scanning, every sense on high alert. The city pulsed around her, alive, indifferent. And in that pulse, she felt it, the sharp edge of survival, the raw clarity of purpose. She wasn't just running. She was hunting too, hunting the truth, hunting freedom, hunting the life she promised to protect for herself and for Lucia. A shadow moved below. Elena froze, instincts snapping. Her mind raced through options, escape routes, contingencies. Whoever it was, they would not find them, not if she had a say. She waited, muscles coiled, breath shallow, watching the figure pass by, oblivious. Once gone, she exhaled slowly, relief and tension mixing into adrenaline-fueled focus. The city was dangerous, yes, but she was more dangerous. And she would not stop. Not until she was safe, not until the past that had hunted her for years was finally buried, and not until Lucia was out of reach of anyone who would ever harm her again. Elena moved again, swift and silent, a shadow merging with shadows, a mother armed with nothing but determination and love. She would not fail. Not tonight. Not ever. Elena's bare feet slipped along the damp rooftop tiles, each step careful but fast, her coat flaring behind her like a shadowed banner. Below, the streets whispered with life. Horns, distant sirens, the occasional shout, but none of it reached her, not yet. She paused at the edge of one building, squinting at the next rooftop 30 feet away, rain slick and unforgiving. Lucia, in her arms, shivered, clutching the stuffed rabbit Elena had grabbed from the overturned stroller, eyes wide but trusting. Elena counted the seconds between breaths, then jumped, rolling across the tiles, scraping her knee but keeping balance. She kept moving. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every alley might be a trap. Her mind raced. Safe house, secure route, checkpoints, possible tails. The city was alive with danger and opportunity all at once. A figure appeared briefly in a doorway below, but a flash of lightning revealed nothing more than a delivery worker, oblivious. Elena's heart slowed slightly, but only slightly. She knew this was temporary. She needed a plan, a place to vanish. The rooftops gave her speed, but they weren't safe. She leapt again, narrowly catching the edge of the next roof, felt the rain biting into her skin, and whispered to Lucia. Almost there, almost safe. The city stretched endlessly around them, a labyrinth of danger. And somewhere below, the threat that had forced them into the night was moving too. Elena didn't know who, Exactly. But she knew they were patient, calculating. And patience could be deadly. Every footstep echoed in her mind, a drumbeat counting down the seconds until confrontation. She ducked behind a chimney, felt the slick moss beneath her fingers, and allowed herself a brief glance at the sleeping child in her arms. Lucia's breathing was shallow, but steady. Elena tightened her grip. No one would take her. Not tonight. Not ever. The rain hammered down harder, drumming against tiles, gutters, and the small terrace where she now crouched, hiding in plain sight. Her eyes scanned the streets below, looking for movement, for the slightest hint of pursuit. And then she saw it, a shadow detaching itself from the alley, tall, deliberate, moving with purpose. Elena froze, calculatins. The next move would determine everything. Elena pressed herself lower against the chimney, the cold biting through her coat. The shadow moved faster now, cutting across the street below with unnatural precision, the glint of something metallic catching the occasional streetlight. She tightened her hold on Lucia, whispering, "Stay with me, okay?" The child's small fingers curled around hers, trusting, unaware of the danger. Elena's mind raced, running through every possible escape, every back alley, every hidden stairwell she knew from the city's map of shadows and fire escapes. One wrong move, and it was over. She crouched, waiting, counting heartbeats. The figure paused directly below the terrace, head tilted up, scanning. Elena held her breath, imagining the fall if she was spotted, imagining the screams, the headlines. The shadow shifted, moving away from the building. Elena exhaled silently, relief twisting with anxiety. Not yet safe, but the path was clear for now. She moved again, leaping to the next rooftop, slick with rain, and rolled as she landed. Pain lanced through her knee, but she ignored it. She kept moving, faster, calculating distances, measuring angles, mentally drawing lines between rooftops. Lightning split the sky, revealing the city in sharp contrasts. Dark alleys, flickering neon signs, the occasional drunk stumbling home. Elena adjusted her grip on Lucia, whispered again. Almost there. Below, the shadow had returned, now moving with more urgency. Elena's eyes narrowed. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving her alone. Her pulse quickened, the thrill of fear and determination mixing. She reached the edge of another building, glanced at the drop, the street far below, and calculated. Jump, grab the ledge, pull them up, vanish into the night. The decision was made in a fraction of a second. She ran, sprinted, launched, and caught the ledge. Dragging herself up, she didn't pause. The city was a maze of danger, but Elena knew its secret paths, its hidden staircases, its rooftops that led to nowhere but freedom. She climbed, silent as a shadow, clutching her child, and vanished into the folds of the sleeping city, leaving only the sound of rain and her own ragged breathing behind. They reached a narrow alley, almost hidden between two crumbling brick buildings, the kind of place people never noticed unless they had a reason to. Elena slid down the fire escape, landing lightly on the wet cobblestones, her boots splashing through puddles. Lucia shivered but didn't cry, her small face pressed into Elena's shoulder. Elena's eyes darted around. No sign of the shadow yet, but she knew better than to trust silence. Every instinct screamed that he, or they, were still hunting, still waiting for a mistake. She led Lucia deeper into the alley, past rusted dumpsters and graffiti-scarred walls, past the smell of rainwater and decay, until she found the old service door she'd used before, the one that led into the hidden catacombs beneath the city, a place where even the most careful trackers couldn't follow. Elena pressed her hand against the cool metal, twisted the handle, and slipped inside. Darkness swallowed them, but inside, it was a sanctuary of shadows and quiet. For a moment, her chest loosened. They weren't safe yet. Not really, but for the first time since the chase began, Elena allowed herself a breath that wasn't trembling. "We keep moving," she whispered. "No stopping." And in the silence, only the echo of their steps and the distant rumble of the city answered back. The catacombs twisted like a labyrinth, damp stone walls closing in around them, the air thick with the scent of mold and old dust. Elena's hand stayed firmly on Lucia's small back, guiding her with precision, memorizing every turn, every shadowed alcove. They moved quickly, silently, the only sound their shoes scraping against the uneven floor. Somewhere above, the city raged on, unaware of the drama unfolding beneath its streets. A faint drip of water echoed somewhere ahead, and Elena froze, listening. Heart hammering, she pressed Lucia against the wall. The drip came again, steady now, almost rhythmic. She shook her head. Not a trap, but a warning. He was close. Too close. Almost there, Elena murmured, though she didn't know if she was reassuring herself or the child. The passage widened slightly, revealing a small chamber, the walls lined with crates and shadows deep enough to hide a dozen people. She slipped inside, crouching low, pulling Lucia with her. The girl's eyes were wide, luminous in the dim light, but she didn't cry. Elena's fingers tightened around her wrist. One wrong move, one careless sound, and everything would be lost. And yet, in that small moment of tension, Elena felt a spark of determination that burned hotter than fear. They would make it. They had to. A single beam of moonlight sliced through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny ghosts. Elena's eyes caught movement, a shadow shifting near the far crates. She froze, heart thudding, pulse in her ears. "Stay close," she whispered to Lucia, who clutched her hand like it was the only anchor in a storm. The shadow moved again, slow, deliberate, testing the silence. Elena's mind raced. They had planned for escape, but not for a face-to-face with him here, underground, where every step echoed like a gunshot. She slid behind a crate, dragging Lucia with her. The shadow rounded the corner. The light caught him, a tall man, sharp eyes glinting in the dim glow, the kind of presence that made you feel every heartbeat at once. Elena held her breath. He paused, sniffed the air like a predator sensing prey, then stepped closer, each movement calculated. The crates pressed against her back, the walls closing in. Every second stretched, every detail magnified. The scrape of his boot, the cold metallic scent of the chamber, the warmth of Lucia trembling against her. And then, with a whisper, she felt it, the plan, the one chance to turn the moment in their favor. He stopped just a few feet away, tilting his head as if listening to something only he could hear. Elena's fingers tightened around Lucia's small hand, nails digging into her palm. The man's eyes flicked toward them, slow, deliberate, like he already knew they were there. Elena's mind raced. One wrong move, and this would be the last mistake either of them made. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to remain steady even as it trembled. "We're not here," she whispered, hoping the shadow couldn't hear. He cocked an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and for a heartbeat, Elena thought she had made a fatal mistake. Then he stepped back, just enough, giving her the faintest sliver of space. Elena exhaled, silent, slow. She motioned for Lucia to follow, inching along the crate-lined wall, every step measured, every breath a silent prayer. The faint click of a door in the distance sent both their hearts racing. Time was running out. Elena pressed herself against the cold metal wall, feeling the rough paint scrape her arm. Lucia's small hand squeezed hers, warm and alive, a reminder of what she had to protect at all costs. The footsteps echoed again, closer now, deliberate and unhurried, like the predator knew exactly where they were. She could see a narrow gap between two stacked crates, a way out, a chance. She tilted her head, catching a glimpse of the corridor beyond, dimly lit, shadows stretching like fingers. One step at a time, she edged forward, coaxing Lucia to follow, whispering, "Quiet, almost there." The air was thick with tension, the smell of oil and dust heavy in her lungs. One wrong move, one sound too loud, and the entire warehouse would erupt with violence. But they had no choice. They had to reach the exit before he turned back. Every second counted. Elena and Lucia slipped through the gap, bodies pressed low, hearts hammering. The corridor stretched like a vein through the building, the dim light flickering overhead, casting their shadows jagged and monstrous against the concrete. A door loomed at the end, paint chipped, rusted hinges, but it promised escape. Elena reached it first, her hand trembling as she turned the handle slowly, listening. Behind them, the heavy footsteps grew louder, a measured rhythm that froze her blood. She opened the door just enough to slip through, dragging Lucia in after her. The cold night air hit them, biting and sharp, carrying the distant hum of the city and the promise of freedom, or at least the illusion of it. She paused, listening, straining, waiting to see if the pursuit had noticed. They pressed against the brick wall, chests heaving, ears straining. The street was empty, slick with rain that reflected the yellow glow of a lone street lamp. Elena's mind raced. Every alley, every shadow, every possible exit calculated in a heartbeat. Lucia tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "They're coming, aren't they?" Elena didn't answer, just shook her head slightly, eyes scanning. A black sedan idled at the next intersection, headlights cutting through the mist. It wasn't theirs. It was them. The men who had been tracking them, silent hunters in the night. Elena grabbed Lucia's hand and pulled her into the shadow of a delivery truck, holding their breath as the engine hummed closer, every second stretching into an eternity. The sedan's engine cut, leaving only the patter of rain and distant sirens. Elena pressed Lucia tighter, feeling the little girl's heartbeat against hers. Then the shadows moved. 3 men stepped from the darkness, faces hidden under black hoods. Elena's mind snapped into focus. One hand went to the gun at her hip, the other shielding Lucia. "Stay behind me," she hissed. The men stopped a few feet away, their presence heavy, deliberate. The tallest spoke first, voice cold. "Elena Moretti, you've taken something that belongs to us." Elena's jaw clenched. "No, you took it from me first." The words hit like a bullet, and the tension broke. The men lunged. Shots rang out, sharp cracks echoing off brick and asphalt. Elena pivoted, dragging Lucia low, returning fire with precision born of desperation. One man fell, another spun, and the third froze, shocked by the ferocity in Elena's eyes. The gunfire ceased almost as suddenly as it had started. Rain hissed on hot metal, the street eerily quiet again. Elena's chest heaved. She looked down at Lucia, safe, trembling, but alive. And from the shadows, the tall man slowly lifted his hood, revealing a face she hadn't seen in years. "I never wanted it to end like this," he whispered. Elena raised her gun again. "It's already over. You lost." The man's shoulders sagged, surrender in his stance. Elena knew it wasn't just a victory. It was survival, hard-earned, but absolute. She grabbed Lucia's hand, pulling her into the night, every step taking them further from the danger and closer to the life they'd fought for. The city swallowed them, rain washing away the blood, leaving only the promise of tomorrow. They ran without looking back, streets slick under neon lights, shadows clinging to corners like memories. Elena kept her grip tight on Lucia, each step a rhythm of urgency and relief. Sirens faded, muffled by the roar of the storm, and in that soundless space, Elena finally let herself breathe. But the city didn't forgive easily. Every alley whispered threats. Every corner promised more danger. She knew the man they had left behind wasn't the only one watching, waiting. Still, for the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt a flicker of control, a thread of hope. "We're going home," she murmured, voice low but certain. Lucia nodded, eyes wide but trusting. They slipped past the last blockade of abandoned cars, the night folding around them like a cloak. Somewhere ahead, a familiar hum of lights promised safety, anonymity, the chance to vanish into the crowd. And Elena knew, no matter what came next, they had survived the storm together. The world outside was cold, ruthless, unforgiving, but so was she. And tonight, she was unstoppable. Elena ran through the slick streets with Lucia clutched to her chest, rain plastering hair to her face, neon signs reflecting like fractured glass on puddles. Every shadow felt alive, every alley a potential trap, but she didn't stop. The sirens had faded, but her heart drummed louder than any warning. She knew he wasn't the only one watching, that the city itself was a predator, hungry and patient, but for the first time she felt a sliver of control, a pulse of hope. "We're almost there," she whispered, voice trembling but firm. Lucia's small hand squeezed hers, trust shining through wide, innocent eyes. They slipped past a barricade of abandoned cars, past broken windows and forgotten signs, the storm masking their movement, washing away footprints, erasing their trail. Ahead, the hum of familiar lights promised anonymity, a chance to vanish into the night, to breathe without constantly scanning for danger. Elena slowed only when she reached the doorway of the old apartment building, the one place they could finally pause, finally hide, finally exist without fear. She eased inside, closing the door softly behind them, the click of the lock echoing like a final heartbeat. Rain pelted the windows, wind howled through the cracked edges, but inside it was still. She laid Lucia on the couch, brushing damp curls from her face, and for the first time, allowed herself to look around. The room was small, cluttered, but it was theirs, a fragile fortress against the chaos outside. Elena sank to her knees, holding her daughter close, and let the tension of the past nights bleed out through her fingers. Outside, the city throbbed with its usual chaos, indifferent and merciless, but inside, the storm was gone. They had survived, and in that survival, Elena felt a fierce, unshakable certainty. Nothing would ever break them again. Whatever waited beyond these walls, whatever threats or betrayals, they had each other, and that was enough. For the first time in a long time, she smiled, sharp and quiet, a blade of resolve. The night stretched on, heavy with possibility, but Elena knew one truth above all. She was done running. They were home,